Happy Friday, everybody. It's Friday. We love Fridays at Findmypast, not just because it's the end of the week. In fact, that has nothing to do with it at all. It's because it's New Records Friday. Every week on Findmypast, we get new records. So always, always, always a good day. My name is Jen Baldwin. I am the Content Acquisition Manager, Content Manager for North America, and I have been with Findmypast for a number of years now, but for the last 2 weeks, I have been off. I was moving house, which is always a stressful situation, but a good one when I'm back. And it's great to be back, and it's great to be back with all of you. So it's a beautiful day in Colorado. It's getting chilly. It's definitely fall, but beautiful blue skies out there. So let me know where you're at, where you're watching from, what the situation is at your house or wherever you are, and what you've been researching, right? We always love to talk to each other about what we are working on. Always important to keep each other excited and enthused about our research. So some of you are tuning in. Thank you very much for your comments. I always appreciate that. We have people from all over the world, which is always so fun and exciting. I love the global community that we have. So Louise is in Edinburgh. Beth is in Almwich, I think is correct. Flo's up in Oregon. Robin is here with us from Toronto. John's in Glasgow. Rosie is in Shropshire. Matthew's in Watford. All sorts of people. It's sunny in Fife. That is good news. Sun is shining in Northern Ireland. Linda says, happy new house. Thank you very much. Mobo is in a cold London. So it has to be rainy and cold somewhere, right? And I think today it's London. It sounds like it's the Southern England region. Sally is in Oxford, near Oxford, excuse me, where she says it's wintry. And I hope you're feeling better, Sally. She's indicating that she's not feeling terribly well. So get better soon. We hope that you have a chance to recover from that very quickly. Diane is with us. Kath is with us from East Yorkshire. Auntie Eat from Rhode Island. Love to see that. Andrew, bit damp in Lancashire today. Not as wet as it was on Wednesday, though. That's good. Kath is in Cincinnati. Oh, Aiden's complimenting my color on my walls. Thank you so much. That's very nice. I painted this room in the process of moving. It was a very dark green, and I wanted it to be brighter. So now it's like this grayish blue color. I really like it. Okay, enough about my house, though. Claire is in Adelaide, Australia. Thank you so much for joining us, Claire. Lorraine's in London. And of course, we have the lovely and wonderful Ellie with us today. Everybody say hi to Ellie. She will be in the comments for us this hour. And she was in London this week, and now she's back up in Scotland. So she had a great time in London, I know, with my fellow co-hosts, Alex and Nico. It was the first time they were all together in 18 months, which is kind of incredible. If you haven't seen that yet, we posted a picture, a little quick snapshot on our Facebook page. So do take a look. Hopefully soon, I will be in London as well. I hope. And the four of us can reunite in person. That'll be very exciting. So we'll keep you posted with that. Okay. Someone said they were in Boston. Oh, it's Paula. Thank you so much, Paula, for being with us. I saw the Boston swing by in the comments. I wanted to make sure I grabbed that. So, Audrey, very nice of you to join us. Hello very much. And thank you for being with us on Friday. We are going to talk today, of course, about new records. But our question of the week, let's get those comments moving. And specifically thinking about a particular period of history. So the discussion today is going to be around social context and social research. And so my question for you all is, what types of contextual research have you done for the post-World War I period? Right, we're talking about a very specific period of time to keep the discussion focused, because it's easy to go off on various tangents. But specifically thinking about after World War I, right? This is one of the most monumental occasions in history, and certainly arguably one of the most important historical periods for the United Kingdom specifically, right? For Britain and Wales. This is a literally life-changing experience. And so how have we as family historians tried to understand the context, the day-to-day world of our ancestors during that specific period? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So do put your question of the week responses in the comments. Please try to start it with a Q or an acronym, QOTW, or something like that, so that we can find those very easily in the comments. And I will let you guys do that as we go through our new records and such. So with that in mind, what are those new records this week? We are very pleased to be adding to our English Roman Catholic collection this week. So you will see updates to all the different record categories: baptisms, marriages, burials, and congregational records. So we have added a new diocese. So we've added Plymouth this week, which is fantastic. So that's brand new to the site. We've also updated Southwark. I had to look at my notes. I'm sorry for the delay. So the collection now spans from 1781 all the way through 1921. So 2 centuries worth, almost 2 full centuries worth of Catholic materials available for your exploration, which is exciting. So just to break this down a little bit, we've had 55,000 new baptisms go online, 16,000 new marriages. Now remember, for every marriage, there's 2 people, right? So, and when you're thinking about the number of names that are possible, double that number, right? Burials are 15,000, so 15,500 new burials. And then congregational records, we've added 15,000 and a half congregational records. And these are, again, we've added Plymouth as a new diocese, and we've updated Southwark, but confirmation or congregational records, I think, are often kind of not used as much, and they should be, right? We're anxious to get into our birth, marriage, and death, obviously. Those vital events are super important to those of us who are building out our trees. But the stories are in our congregational records, right? There's a lot of material in there that's really, really interesting. So I was looking at some of the new materials earlier today, and a lot of them are confirmation records from this particular update. So you're looking at, of course, your ancestor in their youth when they're confirmed into the Catholic Church. And one of the things that I always find interesting is to see what they chose as their confirmation name or their imposed name. It was typically inspired by a saint or the name of a saint. And I know when I was confirmed, because I was raised in the Catholic Church, I had to go through this process as well, and decide what my confirmation name was going to be. And I'll be honest, I don't remember. It's so bad of me. But I'm sure it's documented somewhere in my pile of stuff. But I don't remember what it was. So it's really interesting to me to see what our ancestors' confirmation names were, and learning about that saint, learning about that individual as a youth, so that we can actually at least theorize or guess why that saint would have been important to them, and what was interesting about them, what captured their attention as a young individual, and saying, this is the name I want to take on in my religious faith and my practices. So an interesting angle. Make sure that you look at those confirmation records and those congregational records for the Catholic collection, because it's pretty good stuff. I really enjoy doing that kind of stuff. So couple comments. Let's go back here. Sean says, I'll be looking at those Roman Catholic records. I'm looking for my 2 times great-grandmother baptisms record. Well, good luck. We hope she is in there. I said he. Apologies. And of course, Ellie has shared the link to the new records. Thank you, Ellie, very much. So if you need a direct link, you can find those in the chat. All right, question of the week. Actually, before I get to that, let me go one more item. I wanted to share something actually that was kind of cool that's been happening over the last couple of weeks. So I've been trying to think about how I can actively engage in my family history, even when I don't have a ton of time for research. And of course, the last couple of weeks, I've been really busy because we've been moving. So packing boxes and trying to get everything organized and finalizing all those details. And of course, that gets very intense, right? And in the middle of all of that, my aunt sends me a text and she says, "Hey, I've been talking to a couple of my cousins about one of our ancestral lines. Would you like to join that conversation?" And I just, yeah, of course I do. So we started a text group. And within that, over the last couple of weeks, I've been getting stories I've never heard. I've been getting images and documents. Apparently, one of my dad's cousins is now also researching the family history, and she's working on a line that I haven't really focused on very much. So she's been discovering all sorts of things, and we've been sharing all of this information. And it was so easy. At first, I was like, wow, I'm in the middle of moving. I don't really have a lot of time for this. And eventually I just realized, I kind of woke up to the idea that, like, actually, they're not looking for anything too terribly in depth. They're not asking me a bunch of questions. They're just sharing, right? They're just talking to each other. They're sharing a picture and talking about what they remember about that person. And it was fabulous. So now I have a couple of weeks worth of this group text to go back to. And now that I actually have my office back in place and everything, and all my research is accessible, I can go back and make those changes in my notes and document that in a proper way. But it was just such an easy and great way to communicate with them and to share all those stories. So if you haven't kind of dove into that kind of conversation yet, maybe think about if you can do a text chat or WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or something with one of your family members to see how you can get them to kind of start sharing a few more stories. You never know what is going to come out of those. So that was just a delightful little thing that happened kind of on its own this past couple of weeks, and I wanted to make sure I made note of it. All right. Question of the week. Yeah. Some of you are already commenting on some of the things that I'm going to bring up today. So that's fabulous. Let's show a couple of these comments. Audrey says, newspapers, of course. I found some lovely ads for a department store where I used to work. They bought up lots of government surplus stock to sell at bargain prices, government linen and balloon silk, and a lot of Canadian Army boots. Now that's interesting. I love that story. So that's really good. Beth's question of the week. Family stories are interesting and may reveal extra details about people, which may not appear in official records. Absolutely. Family stories, oral history is always worth chasing down. Let's see. I did a lot of between the wars history at school in the UK and also in Germany. I wrote an essay on the welfare state working backwards in time from post-World War II back to the Rowntree and Booth in the Victorian area. Oh, that is a good span of history. I've also been collecting bits and pieces on the general strike in the 1920s and the Great Depression. Yeah, fascinating. Good research. Let's see, a couple more. Daphne here. Once I got my grandfather's World War I records from the Canadian site, I bet I know which Canadian site you're talking about too. I was able to follow his progress through the war diaries. Casualty clearing station diaries. He was machine gunned in both legs. Oh my goodness. Then various hospitals in the UK, then to his birth home in Dundee, recuperating, and then down to the Canadian Bexhill-on-Sea training camp where he met my nan. So that's a fascinating piece right there, Daphne. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's so much there to dig into, right? So first of all, she mentions the Canadian site. So that I'm thinking that's probably Library and Archives Canada. That's the primary site for military records for Canada. Library and Archives Canada has a great deal of information on it, and they make it pretty readily available. So that's definitely a site worth checking out if you have any kind of Canadian connection. She mentions the war diaries, which are also available, many of them on Findmypast. Casualty clearing station diaries. He was machine gunned in both legs. So I wonder if you've thought about the weaponry that was used. That's part of that story, right? Various hospitals in the UK. What was happening around those hospitals? What kind of entertainment did they have in the holidays, right? What did they do to make the veterans, the soldiers, feel a little bit better and improve morale, right? All of those kinds of things could be looked into. His birth home in Dundee, which is one of the places in Scotland I've actually visited. And so what kind of historical photos might you have from that period around Dundee? And then into the training camp where he meets your grandmother. So yeah, and same story, right? How did he actually get there? How did he travel from one place to another? What was the actual mode of transportation? These are the types of things that we're referring to when we talk about social context, right? And we actually do this type of research every day. We may not necessarily think about it. We may not even realize that we're doing it, but it happens all the time, right? So let's start our discussion a little bit with actually defining social context, because we talk about it a lot, even in this forum. And we talk about it a lot as family historians, but we don't necessarily ever sit down to think about exactly what that means. So I looked it up. I grabbed a definition. So what exactly is social context? In essence, it's the stories, right? It's the little details that make up the stories of our ancestors that we find in other sources. Technically, from an academic perspective, it's how someone reacts to something depending on their immediate social or physical environment. It can influence how someone perceives something, and it can absolutely influence decisions that our ancestors made. So, in relation to family history, it's the time and place our ancestors lived and everything about those times and places, right? It adds insight into how they lived and, of course, what affected their lives. So, from social history, we get a lot. We gain a lot of advantage. We can understand the daily lives of our ancestors, their culture, their community, their town, their village, their religion, their social outlets, the saloon they went to, or the friendly society they were a member of. Social context absolutely helps us find clues to the next step in our research, whether that's leading us back to government records or additional, different types of sources. It helps us to understand why they made certain decisions, like did they immigrate, or did they choose a new occupation when they got back from the war? Did they kind of do a complete 180 and go a different direction from an occupational standpoint? Why did they make those decisions? Social context helps build those theories. We can obviously look at social life and social customs, right? What did they do for Christmas at the holidays? Did they celebrate Easter? Did they take an annual summer vacation, summer holiday? And did they always go to the same place, and where and why? Did they participate in the arts in some fashion, right? Did their children take piano lessons or dance classes? And why did they make those decisions? Of course, we want to look at world and national history, which are two really big topics, but help inform, right, our family history and help us understand what our ancestors were going through. And then take that big picture of world and national history and take it down to a much more granular local level. So again, we're all doing this all the time. We just don't think about it a lot. And I think in a lot of situations, we need to be a lot more specific and intentional with this type of research. So I'm going to go back to the comments because everybody's making a lot of really good suggestions. And I did that one. Let's see. Question of the week. Where'd it go? Oh, yeah. So this one's perfect. Sally says, I just love looking at old photos and also some of the old videos on YouTube. That's exactly the type of material that I'm talking about and stuff that I get really excited about, right? You can find all sorts of things on the internet today, and the footage is incredible. So a couple of years ago, I was working on a research project for someone that I work with, and one of her ancestors immigrated into Canada right around the turn of the century, and we knew the vessel that the family had traveled over on. And I was able to find video footage of that ship sailing, like somebody had taken some video about 10 or 15 years after her family immigrated, but it was exactly the same boat. And it really hadn't been modified or changed to any capacity. So you've got this video footage of the experience of traveling across the Atlantic Ocean at somewhere around the turn of the century. And that was an incredible thing to sit down and show my colleague and just say, hey, look at this. This is the actual boat that took your ancestor from England to Canada. And it was such a cool moment, right? It's those types of things that we're really looking for. And in this period, specifically that post-World War I period, is when those types of materials start to become really readily available, right? We look at a lot of materials and things from kind of pre-World War I that are drawings and sketches and interpretations. But as we get into World War I and that, the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, of course, photography becomes more accessible to the regular guy. Videography becomes more accessible to the regular person. So it's a great period to study social context because we have a lot more real content to work with. Okay, so a couple other examples that I want to point out because people are sharing all sorts of great ideas. This is awesome. Alan says a lot of large estates sold off land after World War I, and many tenant farmers became owner occupiers. Not all managed the consequences of that. So that's a really good example, Alan, of understanding the local and national history and that experience of what our ancestors are going through. That's fabulous. The television shows, I think, Who Do You Think You Are is very good for giving bits of social history, bits of history we might have missed before that might tie in with our own research, whether in time period or place. And I would add to that, A House Through Time, I'm totally hooked because of that. And actually I got my dad hooked as well. We watch it via YouTube and other means because we're obviously not in the UK and it doesn't broadcast over here, but it's a fascinating show. I absolutely love those kinds of series. Documentaries are another great source to get some of this information. Beth says it's worth reading local history books, and old photos can add an extra layer of information. Absolutely, Beth. And I would add to that, actually, that it's worth reading academic sources as well. I do a lot of research around the Revolutionary War period. And of course, I do a lot of newspaper research on our newspapers. And I do a lot of I read a lot, and I do a lot of Google Books and that kind of thing. But one of the things that caught my attention a couple of years ago was a particular paragraph in a book called An Empire on the Edge, How Britain Came to Fight America. And the author, Nick Bunker, actually says in his text that that although those in the colonies and those in Britain are speaking the same language, the words that they were using, like liberty, patriotism, law, had actually come to mean two different things on both sides of the Atlantic. So as we're gearing up towards this, military conflict and this war, they're actually misunderstanding completely what the other party is trying to say, because the word patriotism to a colonist was interpreted and used in a very different way than it was used by the British. And I took that and I went, oh, that's really interesting, because when I read an article from the British newspaper archive that's published in Britain, and it's an editorial and it says these American patriots, I actually am going to interpret that sentence in a completely different way now than I would have before I read that book, right? And before I had that insight that the vocabulary was so different between these two cultures. So even in a common language setting, we need to really make sure that we understand the context of the words that our ancestors are using, right? Okay. Oh, and Audrey beat me to it. Thank you, Audrey. I was going to mention this as well. Photographs of the area where your family lived. The Frances Frith collection is great for this. In her home city, Glasgow, there's a terrific site called Virtual Mitchell. And someone else posted the link, I think it looks like. So yeah, absolutely. Frances Frith is fantastic. I actually grabbed a couple of images to use as examples. Ellie, would you mind sharing the link I sent you? We're going to share a link, and if everybody could grab this one and take a look at it, it's pretty cool pictures. And it's just one example, right? But I looked at, let's see when she's 2 seconds, she's getting it. I wanted to look at what the city of Birmingham was like after the war. I had ancestors there well before the war in the early 1800s. And so I had kind of this idea in my head of that period of history, but I wanted to know, I'm assuming that there are other family relations still in that area. So I wanted to know what their world was like. And when you take a look at that link, and Ellie shared it in the comments, thank you so much, Ellie. It is the picture of, there's a photograph of a cinema, right? But it allows us to see, as we scroll through these photographs, we can see, women walking through the park, their attire, and the type of baby stroller they were using, or the baby carriage they were using, all sorts of different little details that allow us to really get into these kind of situational periods, right? And allow us to ask all these questions of our ancestors. Let me put up another example. So I'm actually going to share my screen. So take a look at this. So this is just a random example I found. Too fast. I found on the British Newspaper Archive, right? This is the Bath Chronicle newspaper, January 6, 1923. Andrew says, Ellie, you posted .com. And that's actually my fault, Andrew, because I sent the link to Ellie and I used .com, not .co.uk. So she's going to share the link to just Francis Firth, maybe. Okay, so here is this wonderful newspaper, right? This is the Bath Chronicle, January 6, 1923. It's just a random example that I came across. And it's an amazing photograph, right? Even, Matthew's already commented, great photo, right? It absolutely is. And actually, I keep zooming in when I don't want to, sorry. If you scroll down this page, you see all of these other photographs, right? These are great. There's even a wedding picture. He's got his eyes closed, just for reference. So we've got all these wonderful materials. And as family historians, we utilize these newspapers all the time. But the piece that I think many of us tend to overlook, myself included, I make this mistake myself. Look at this wonderful advertisement for the shoes just right alongside. That's the social context that we're looking for. And a couple of you have already commented on advertisements and looking at newspapers for this kind of detail. But, I love using the example about, do you know where your ancestor got their shoes? And so now we know if your ancestor was in Bath in 1923, they may have gotten them at Revel and Sons shoes, and things were on sale. They were having a sale, which is important. Everybody knows that it's important when you're shoe shopping to look for the sales, right? You buy one in every color when you find a style that you like. All right. There are just amazing, amazing pieces in this paper. And if you scroll down just a little bit more, you can obtain their photographs at the Chronicle office on Westgate Street. And the first thing I asked myself was, I wonder if that archive still exists. Like, where is this collection today, right? Because that would be something incredible. All of these photographs are credited to the newspaper staff. So they took all of these, they own all of these photographs. Can we still find them today? Is that possible? Because that would be amazing, right? And actually, if you go through this newspaper, literally page by page, I found, 20 or 30 different things that I was just like, that's awesome, right? The children were taking dance lessons. They were offering, people were offering needlecraft lessons and classes, singing classes for kids. There was one page that included a test for eyesight, right? If you can read this and see it just like this, then you're good. But if you can't see this, what we're talking about, then you need to come in and get your eyes checked. And it was sitting right next to an article about briberies, and then another article about weddings. So we go in to find these details about weddings and events in our ancestors' lives, and we end up seeing a 1923 test for eyesight. Right. Or there was an article, a couple pages about the popularity, or a couple pages in, the popularity of motor cars. And the article was actually saying, as vehicles increase in our community, it's there's not adequate parking. And I just kind of chuckled to myself, because is there ever adequate parking anywhere? Right. Like, these are the types of things that our ancestors were discussing on a day-to-day basis, and being able to say, like, hey, letter to the editor, there's not enough parking in our town. We need to be thinking about this. There was actually also a little comic strip that I love reading time period comics, because that is a representation of what they were experiencing, the issues that they were going through at the time, all the things that they were trying to deal with are represented in cartoons, right, in comic strips. and especially political cartoons, right? Those are fabulous. So take time to read the comics. It's so good. It's such good research. Okay. Yeah. So going back to the comments, just want to share some of these. Audrey adds for us again. If you're in the UK, there's a wonderful cable channel, Talking Pictures, which shows old TV shows and a series of short films look at life that were shown in cinemas in late 50s and early 60s. I have found a lot of that on YouTube also. There's a lot of period stuff like silent films and things on YouTube, and Internet Archive is another great resource for that type of material, kind of from a global perspective. Coal mining related videos on YouTube. Another option for those of you who are looking at your coal mining ancestors. That's always a good one. Lori is with us, and Lori was touched on something that I was gonna mention, so thank you very much. Oh, and that's the wrong comment. Sorry, I'll get to Andrew in just a second. Lori is involved in the British Home Children project. So a lot of children were immigrated from the UK to Canada post World War I. And her website, the website for that project, is on the screen. It is a fabulous resource. Please do take a look. And of course, that does segue nicely. Not every story that we're going to research is a happy one, right? We're not always going to find pictures of happy children singing in concert halls. We absolutely have to dive into all of the stories and all of the social context. So, Lori, thank you very much for sharing that link. Now, Andrew's comment. Our local heritage group inherited the glass photo slides from our local paper. They are now all scanned. That's fabulous. And we've done a couple of those types of projects as well, right? The part of the collection that Findmypast is digitized with the Historical Society of Pennsylvania includes a newspaper photo archive. It's actually a World War II period. Excuse me. But it is a fantastic collection for military photographs, headshots, and all sorts of other PR and media type materials, which is really, really great. Oh, this is good. Yep, spot on with cartoons. There was one we used a lot in school and college, in between the wars with the Treaty of Versailles and the child crying. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good stuff. All right. So a couple other comments I wanted to make, right? Because we're not just talking about newspapers, we're talking about social context as a whole. And so for that, we need to understand every facet of their life. So a couple other resources specifically that we've added that you may not have considered as part of social context research. So one of those is actually a small collection of passenger ship posters that we published on Findmypast last year at some point. I don't remember exactly when. And they're advertising images, right? They're these ship companies putting out these posters and flyers and saying, hey, if you're going to immigrate, or if you're going to take a holiday, come take it with us. So those kinds of marketing materials can be really insightful. I found a set on the Library of Congress website, I want to say, a couple of weeks ago, that was a series of advertising posters for the Underground in London. And they're beautiful. There are these beautiful color photographs and prints. And the style that they're in, right, of course, is very appropriate to the period. They're drawn in a particular way. They're fabulous little pieces of kind of London culture, London history. So those kinds of materials are always really exciting and fun to consider. Sally saying we all need a Findmypast mug. Yeah, I have my Findmypast mug here. Yep. It's got our little values on the side. I actually really like it. But the funny story about this mug, and I totally am getting distracted right now, but the funny story about this mug is it's quite smaller than my usual coffee cup, right? So which I actually still have sitting here too from the morning. So look at that. And when my daughter, when I got this, my daughter was like, "What is that for a child?" It was very cute. Nope, it's just a regular size instead of an oversize. Okay, so back to our topic, social context. See, this is my social context, right, that I'm living out right now. So take a look at some of those advertising materials and the marketing materials, like the passenger ship posters. Those are really good. And of course, don't overlook these very kind of in-depth record collections that we offer, such as the school records collection, right? You're going to find who they went to school with as a child, who was the school administrator. You're possibly going to find, in many cases, you're going to find genealogical information, the names of the parents, their birth dates, etc. But you're also going to find things like the whole class of girls went to the funeral of this local individual who passed away. So who was that person? Why was she so important that the entire class of older girls actually attended the funeral, right? What was significant about that individual? What was important about the school itself, right? Why was the school put where it was put? Who owned the land? Who allowed it to be built? How was it funded? Was it a private school? Was it a religious school? And so forth. Was it a school for orphans? Was it a school for foundlings? Was it one of those situations where it was, kind of behavior modification, right? So all of that context goes into our research so that we can truly understand not just the fact that they went to school, but what was that school experience like? And again, combine that with the photograph collections like Frances Firth and get yourself a picture of the school, right? Another great collection to do this type of research with is the Crime, Prison, and Punishment collection on Findmypast, because of course you're going to get all sorts of different angles, right? In one instance, I was researching someone who was a potential ancestor and found that he wasn't convicted of a crime, but he was the victim, supposed victim of a crime. And all of his case was kind of played out in those records for me. And I was able to track the person who was convicted of the robbery and their transportation to Australia and all of these other things that happened as a result of this robbery that impacted my theoretical ancestor. I'm not totally sure yet. So don't forget about some of those materials that have been around for a while, but that we need to go back to kind of every single week, every month, every year at least, and go, okay, what else can I learn from this particular record set? Okay, let's see. I'm going to go back to the comments and make sure I'm not missing anything because I'm just talking. Old newspapers is quite a rabbit hole. Yeah, it absolutely is. I think I lost like 3 hours yesterday to just this one issue of the newspaper. Yeah, it took me a while, but it was a lot of fun. Okay, so, and another good suggestion. Yeah, Scotland's people have more than just BMDs. They do have photos as well, and worth looking at family history Facebook groups or old school groups. Absolutely. Family history societies are the lifeblood of family history, right? We couldn't do what we do without them. Incredibly important organizations. And that Facebook comment is also very true. I was able to actually find a picture of the Catholic Church in which my mom was married and baptized, actually. And what I didn't realize at the time until I talked to the Historical Society tied to the church, this is in Birmingham, Alabama, was that my ancestors were some of the founding members and they donated money to have the church built in the first place. So they actually sent me a couple of photographs of construction, like midway through construction of this church, because my ancestors were involved in that process. And then, of course, all the way through to my mom's generation and out my cousins and such being baptized and married in that same church building. So absolutely use social media to your advantage for this kind of social context research. This is a great comment. Love the school records. I found so many relatives in them. Hope more years will be added so I can find my great-great-grandfather in the same school as his brother. So that would be really good. I don't know if we have any intention of adding more years, but we will certainly send that suggestion in to the content team to see what if we're going to do anything there. I don't know. Here we go is another good comment from Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. I've researched the victim of a crime committed by a distant cousin. It was complicated. Everyone seemed to marry more than once. So yeah, absolutely. You want to make sure that you get the full story of those events in their life, right? And that does include going outside of your biological family. Okay, a couple other things I wanted to talk about in terms of social context specifically. It's not just all about the written word, and we've mentioned it in passing already during this hour, but don't forget about the arts, right? Music, dance, the cinema, movies, culinary arts, right? What were our ancestors cooking? Did they go out to eat? Did they go to a pub? But did they serve food there? Like, what are all of those types of experiences as well? So there's a lot of opportunities here. I found a website called openmusicarchive.org that has a number of materials on it and allows you to kind of search by genre, search by era, so that you can listen to the music of our ancestors, right? Internet Archive, as I mentioned before, has a number of collections available. Quick search on there led me to of 1925 videos, very short, 1925 footage of the Glen Oaks Clubhouse in Michigan. Now, I don't know anything about the Glen Oaks Clubhouse. It was just an interesting way to see, again, the buildings, the attire, the vehicles, the culture, the society of 1925 Michigan, right? So those types of resources are kind of all around us. And I think one of the things that tends to get a bit overwhelming about social context is that it is overwhelming, right? It can quickly stack up. It can quickly kind of overwhelm your research opportunities. And so we need to keep ourselves focused and organized in a certain way. So a few years ago, I actually found this acronym that's used in education systems. And over here, it would be like a middle school or junior high level education. And the acronym is GRAPES. And let me actually, hang on, I did this. And I will put it on the screen really quick. So GRAPES, just like that. Okay, so this is a great way to keep ourselves kind of focused and organized and structured when it comes to social context. So the G stands for geography, right? Where is the event or the person or the thing located? Does the size or location have any effect on the way of life in that area? What's the climate and weather like? What are some of the major landforms or geographical regions? Is it mountainous? Is it a lot of lakes? Is it a desert? Are there intense river systems? Like, what's happening geographically? The R stands for religion, right? What did the people believe? Did they worship one god or many gods? Was religion a big part of daily life, or was it kind of secondary to other things like trying to find food or economics? The A stands for achievements. What types of buildings or structures did that society make? What were some of the inventions that were happening, right? What were they known for? What did they study? Did they have a written language? Could everyone read it? Because not all of our ancestors could. And at what point did that become accessible? The P stands for politics. How was that society governed? What would that local government look like, but also from a much larger scale, right? What did the county, the country, in the case of the UK, right, and especially post World War I and into the future, how are things changing between the monarchy and the political leaders, right, career politicians? How is that? What's happening in that very tumultuous period in terms of politics, right? How did we make these decisions to go to war and to not go to war, right? And did they take over other lands? And that's obviously a big question for the British Empire, right? Across its history, there's a lot of research and learning that can happen there. The E stands for economics. So what was the major center of trade? What were the agricultural pieces or the manufacturing that they were doing at that time and in that place? How were our ancestors keeping themselves in a financial situation, right? Were they earning money? Were they bartering? What were they doing to survive? Especially again after World War I, when you have all of these men either not coming home at all or coming home in a way that they're unable to work and support their families. So who did they interact with from an economics perspective? And then how did the government spend money as well, right? Was money spent on public works? Or was it kind of an elite type situation where they were spending a lot more money in certain areas of town and not over there where it really was needed for infrastructure purposes and those kinds of things? So think about the economic perspective of our ancestors, not just their own financial, their own bank account, but that larger big picture of economics. And then the S stands for social structure. So who were the highest class, right? Who were the elite? Did they have the most power? Were there people who were enslaved, or were they very, very poor? Was there a level of poverty in that area that was kind of overwhelming to the community? What was life like? If you walked down the street and you weren't of the elite class, what was it like for you to walk down the sidewalk and pass by other people? Could a person go between classes, right? Did they have the ability to move themselves economically, to put themselves into a better situation or at a higher advantage? So that acronym of GRAPES is, to me, incredibly useful because it really gives me structure around my social context research. It allows me to really understand and kind of categorize everything that I'm working on so that I don't get to the point where I'm lost or confused, I'm overwhelmed with information, but I also make sure that I have looked at all of the major categories of life. So that's one of my little kind of my little tricks when it comes to social context. The other one that I like to use quite a lot, and let me take this off the screen so I can go back to my comments, is actually an app, and it helps me keep organized. So let me see, I'm going to pull it up here so you guys can see this. Now, there are a number of different versions and products that you can get that kind of look like this. Oh, oops, that doesn't work. Hang on just a second, I'm almost there. In this particular case, the one that I like to use is called Mendeley. And what it does is actually organizes all of the different resources that I acquire onto my computer. So when I go onto Jstor, for example, and I download a PDF, this system will automatically pull that PDF into itself, into how it works, and categorizes it for me. So in this case, we're looking at a number of materials around fraternal research, because I do a lot of research around fraternal societies. And you see this whole giant list of articles and stuff. This is all the information that I've accumulated from in a digital format over the years, right? So if I click on one of these, over on the margin, I get the ability to adjust all the name and everything. I can add tags. I can organize everything into folders, etc. I can also just click right down here directly and be linked immediately into the article, right? So instead of trying to keep a folder, instead of trying to organize it for myself, I let Mendeley do all that work for me so that it's all right there in one system, right? My entire basically e-library is held in this app. It's free. There are other versions that you can pay for, of course. You can pay for other features and that kind of thing. But I just use the free version, and it allows me to keep my research very organized and very easy to find and get to. You know, when you're down in that rabbit hole and you're just like digging through stuff and downloading things and acquiring materials at a really heavy rate at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, no one ever does that, right? This system, when I wake up the next morning and it's hit my desk, Mendeley will have updated itself. And everything that I just pulled at 2 o'clock in the morning will be there waiting for me so that I can analyze it. So find yourself a system, especially if you do a lot of this type of research, find yourself a system that works for you in terms of organizing your research. It will make a huge difference. I also use a lot of binders. And I organize those typically by topic as well. So I've mentioned I do a lot of fraternal society research. I do a lot of immigration research, right? So I have a binder for each of those categories, so that I can, if I want to print, I can, and I have a place where everything kind of lives. Now, Valerie just asked, what app is this? It is called Mendeley, and we did share the link in the chat. So Allie's got that. Or I'm sorry, I said Allie. Ellie has shared that in the comments. So thank you, Valerie, for asking for clarification there. This is great. I was waiting for your name to pop up. Jen has a file titled mining. Maybe there's some answers there for you. I'll tell you, most of my mining research is the Western United States. So if you have questions about the Western US, I'm definitely there for you. Okay, so that's one technique, right? Is that app. The second is, of course, using binders or magazine holders like this one, right? Like these, to organize your materials. And then don't forget about all those materials that you have on your tablets or your e-reader device. They, like a Kindle, right? They allow you to tag and organize your bookshelf, so that you can find things easily. You can make notes in those digital formats. And I refer to those notes often, right? So I pull them up all the time. And the last piece from an organizational standpoint is to attach your discoveries to your tree, even if it's an article that you download from Jstor, right? If it's specifically relevant to one particular person in your family history, who maybe was a miner, right? Or maybe was a member of the Masonic Lodge, and you found an article about that particular period of time around the Masons. Attach it to the tree. Don't just let it sit on your computer. Go into your Findmypast account and make sure that it's part of that person's profile. So it's associated kind of permanently, right, in an online format with the person that you're working on, so that you don't lose it, you don't forget it's there, you don't forget that you have it, but also so that as you learn more about that person from a kind of traditional genealogical perspective, you can go back and reread that article and look at it with fresh eyes, right? Now, I've mentioned Jstor a couple of times. I do want to touch on that really quickly. And I know we've got a few minutes left, so we should be good. Jstor is a fantastic resource. It is full of information. So it's mostly it's academic articles. Some are public domain and some require a subscription, but you can have a free account. If you've not used Jstor before, Ellie did share a link in the chat. It's there for you. I highly recommend that is the thing that you do this weekend, right? Play around with our new records, look at those Catholic ancestors, and then make yourself an account on Jstor. Even with a free account, you can save articles into kind of an organizational system again. And then once you get to a facility that has full access, then you can just pull them up easily and download them and read them. So just a few examples. I went into my saved articles on Jstor just to see what I could offer as an example. So I have articles about the women's workforce, specifically post World War I, the Salvation Army. I have articles about migrants, Americans that came to Europe, but also Canada asking for immigration, right? Asking for immigrants and children, as we talked about earlier. I have articles on slang and the global perspectives of the variation of the English language during this time period. I have articles about the politics, global and national, and from all different perspectives. The rise of Nazi Germany as we get closer to World War II, and how Nazism is kind of expanding and moving its way around the globe, right? I have articles on child welfare programs, mass market magazines, makeup and fashion, labor relations, both at home and internationally between countries. I found an article about football post World War I, and not American football. I actually used the British reference there, actual football, and how football, the sport, changed between the wars as a cultural piece, right? How it changed for the viewers, the spectators, but also for the athletes. It's actually a really interesting article. I have articles about the morbidity rate and statistics and causes during that period, immediately following World War I. I have articles about what we would now refer to as post-traumatic stress disorder and how our ancestors dealt with it. And of course, after World War I, that is such an important topic to touch on if you had ancestors who fought in the war. Or even just survived the war, right? And think about that in terms of World War II as well. If they survived the Blitz, they probably had PTSD. The possibilities around this type of research are really, really, truly endless. And they live and breathe on sites like the British Newspaper Archive, in collections on Findmypast, but also in these academic sources like Jstor and Google Books. So take advantage of all of those materials. Take advantage of documentaries, podcasts, online learning courses, or MOOCs, right, as they're referred to. Take advantage of your family history society, because those discussions and conversations expand and your creativity kind of goes wild. Go to lectures and watch presentations or watch recordings of presentations. There's a whole series of them on the Findmypast YouTube channel that you could take advantage of that bring up these types of topics. Go to museums when you get the chance. Watch reenactments, military and battle reenactments, living history displays, explore photographic collections, marketing collections, all sorts of materials that allows you to really understand the life of your ancestor. I am going to go to the comments one more time, but I'm going to put this acronym back on the screen. Don't forget your grapes. Always keep in mind that the grapes are just a great way to kind of keep yourself organized, keep yourself on target in terms of the research that you're doing. It can be kind of a mammoth project, right, to take on. Just as a quick example, I grabbed a couple things as show and tell, right? So I've got an article here about Canada's campaign for immigrants and the images in Canada West magazine. I had ancestors in this period who ended up on the plains of Canada. And that's exactly what this article is referring to. This one's from Jstor. We've got a number of different topics that we could consider. One of the books that's on my list to read as soon as I can is The Suffragents. I haven't read this one yet. I'm excited to read it, though. It's how women used men to get the vote in the United States in particular. The Imperial Cruise. This is another good read. This one I really, really liked. James Bradley's book, The Secret History of Empire and War, and basically what America did and our president leading into World War I. This was a fascinating read. I had no idea most of this history. So take advantage of these kinds of publications. And actually, it's a really good read, too. It was very easy to read. Next, also on my list is a biography. And these we kind of maybe don't think about in terms of genealogical research, but we should. And this is a lesson I've learned in the last few months myself. And this one is actually The Patriarch. It's the remarkable life and turbulent times of Joseph P. Kennedy, who, of course, was an ambassador to Britain. And of course, the patriarch of the Kennedy family. And they talk about kind of the entry into World War I and his how did they say it? The fall from grace leading up into World War II. So it's exactly the period I'm interested in right now, right? That post-World War I period. But this biography is going to give me insight into the politics and the society of the day that I wouldn't get necessarily from a what happened after World War I history book, right? So this context is everywhere. It's all around us. And it's important, I think, that we keep in mind that these are absolutely wonderful opportunities for our research. Okay, so with that, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I could talk about social context all day, but Ellie and I do have a staff meeting to attend. So we are going to say goodbye for the weekend. Thank you all very much for joining us. We always appreciate having you with us. If you have comments, suggestions, any feedback for us as a team or for Findmypast, we're always happy to hear those from you. You can send them into support@findmypast.com. And we look forward to sharing next week's discoveries with you. We'll have a whole new set of records coming out next week, of course. And thank you for being a part of our community. Love having you guys with us, and have a fabulous weekend and enjoy your social context research.